sair. Sorry.
Não, você
Não é aquele que tá com às vezes. Tem um que tem um substituizinho, né?
Não está conseguindo passar?
Não, aqui já. Vou acessar aqui.
Ok.
That's okay. I can just use the office. No, this is it.
Já está transmitindo?
Uhum.
Já? Onde está o link?
Tá na página do evento. Aqui. Tem que compartilhar aqui na página do evento. It's fine.
Yes, I was doing it yesterday.
Podemos começar? Let's start?
Yeah.
Ok. Bom, bom dia a todos, boa tarde, né? Hoje a gente tem a presença, então, da Rochelle Haynes. Ela é pesquisadora na Universidade de Lincoln e vai conversar hoje com a gente sobre carreira acadêmica e também um pouco do trabalho que ela está desenvolvendo. In name of FGV, would you like to thank you for your presentation and for your presence today. Okay.
Okay, bom dia. I'll go ahead and make it start. Don't worry, that's all the Portuguese I know. Okay, so my presentation today is just really a discussion on how you can go about developing as an early career academic, or how you can make that transition from, let's say, a research student into, let's say, lecturing, or however you want to chart your career. So this is really around my experience. There's no real one way of doing it, but I can just tell you what worked for me. So I have about 10 or 11 slides, but they're very loose. It's no recipe or anything like that. Okay, so this is just the format I'm going to take. I'm just going to say a bit on my background and what was my path as an academic to where I am now, and how I go about pursuing, let's say, my academic career path, if you want to call it that. And then I'll just go into highlighting some of the development opportunities I took advantage of and that are hopefully available to research students in general, and some general things to watch out for before concluding. I feel bad having you sit there.
No, that's fine, don't worry.
Okay, so originally I'm from Barbados, which is in the Caribbean. And when I first took my degree, it was in psychology and also sociology and history. And my aim was to be a child psychologist. But in Barbados, there are no internships for child psychology. So what I sought to do instead was, if I want to work with kids, I decided, okay, I'll be a primary school teacher and just get that experience working with children. But as I was telling the other group yesterday, after a year or so of working with 30 kids in a classroom, I just realized it's not for me, it's not the path that I want to take. So I made a transition because I also did accounts, I made a transition into a Canadian trust firm as an accounts executive. And it was there that I developed this interest in HRM, because this is my research interest, HRM and international business, human resource management and international business. At any point, if I'm speaking too fast, please let me know. I'm not doubting your English skills, but it's just generally I speak really fast and people usually have to tell me to slow down. So stick a hand up and I'll try to control my pace. Yeah, so while I was at this firm, I think I was doing fairly well. So they offered me a chance they didn't have an HRM department. So they offered me a chance to start an HRM department in this firm because of how I work with the clients. But the catch of that offer was that they wanted me to pursue a master's in Barbados, and I wanted to get the overseas experience of studying. So because I said no to studying in Barbados, they basically took the offer back. So that's how I kind of ended up in the UK from that job. I worked there for about a year or so, and then pursued a master's in the UK in HRM. So from the master's, I also did a bit of consultancy work with the Leicester City Council, where I was basically consulting with their HR department on how they can better attract and retain employees within this particular organization, because they were getting a lot of competition from other firms and people stealing their clients, stealing their employees. So then after that, through that as well, I got a PhD scholarship with the Leicester Business School at DMU. And that's kind of started my academic career path. So it was through this scholarship that I started part-time lecturing. And then let's say in the third year of part-time lecturing, because I was coming to the end of my scholarship, I thought, well, I need some sort of employment. I need to eat, so I need a job. So from there, I applied for a role at the University of Lincoln, which was a full-time post. And that's where I am now. I've been there for the last 2 years. So I'm just going to speak about with regards to where I am and how I go about, well, my career path, so to say. So with regards to my research interests, these are just the general areas that I'm interested in pursuing. I look a lot at international assignments or expatriates, what expatriates do in multinational firms. I also am interested in that relationship between multinational firms and their foreign subsidiaries, particularly micropolitics between individuals within the subsidiary level and how they kind of resist, let's say, head office policies that are being, let's say, transferred. Also that as well is this interest in knowledge transfer and innovation. So these are just some of the research groups that I'm a member of. One is called Contemporary Research on Work and Employment, and that's very much industrial relations focused. And that's with Leicester Business School, which is where I do my PhD. This one is with where I teach at University of Lincoln, the Responsible Management Research Group. This is more interested in ethical management. And then there's some involvement with the European International Business Academy in their early career research group, and also as a reviewer and taking part in their conferences. So those are some of the things that I'm going to speak about today with regards to what are the benefit of not only the different roles, but things like the conferences and how you can go about building an academic career. Not that I'm an expert, but again, this is my experience. Excuse me. So, well, I'll come to that in a bit. I don't need to list those ones so much, because these are just more professional qualifications. So can I just ask how many people are interested in pursuing an academic career or already in an academic career? Are these interested or in? Who's in a teaching post already? Okay, so you're interested in pursuing, and in what areas? What areas?
Marketing and customer behavior.
Oh, okay. And you? Same. Are you all in marketing?
No, quantitative methods.
Sorry?
More quantitative methods.
Oh, okay. I can probably learn from you because I'm a very qualitative person. I'm not a fan of quantity. We'll see. So I'll just say what worked for me. One of the things, we can probably skip that. These are just a few publications in the areas that I'm interested in, but we can skip that. Yeah. So in terms of my philosophy on academia, this picture pretty much sums it up. Because how I see it is, I'm a person, I don't care if you tell me no, I will find another sort of avenue. And that's what I found has worked for me. I'm not saying that it's best for everyone, but I find in academia, my philosophy on it, the worst thing anybody can say is no. So if I apply for a grant and they say no, well, I apply for another one, either within the university or somewhere else. And then people approach you as well with opportunities. And I tend to have this leap first, ask questions later. And that's not always the best approach, but it worked for me. So in terms of my academic philosophy, this is the kind of approach that I take to it in terms of pursuing conferences, in terms of pursuing, let's say, research grants, which is one of the reasons that I'm here. I was actually, for being here, I'll tell you how I got here. I was writing a PhD chapter one morning, and I got an email from work that said Santander is offering these research grants to those interested in creating collaborations across universities around the world. So, excuse me, it was pretty much a page to write. You had to write 1,000 words for this grant. And I was like, should I write this? No, I should finish my PhD. But it's only going to take 50 minutes to write this. But no, you really have to finish the PhD. But it's just going to take a half hour. It's not going to kill me to take a half hour. So it's kind of like back and forth with this. But in the end, I decided, you know what? This is a good opportunity. It might not come back around again. So I just wrote it. And I wrote it with this mentality because I spoke to my boss about it the following morning. And she said, well, just be aware that more experienced lecturers than yourself will be applying for this. So there are no promises here, but feel free to go and apply. And again, that's how I am. I don't care if you say no, I'll just apply anyway. So I was and I'm a very excitable person as well. So when I got to the email in the morning saying that we were approved, I was actually very shocked and I actually screamed out in my office, just involuntarily. But yeah, that's just my approach with it. And even what I find, whereas even when somebody says no, that's not a failure to me. That's more of, I would describe it as a lesson. Because, for example, my PhD, with my final research framework, I was telling Cynthia that I did a JIBS workshop, Journal of International Business, and they were very harsh in critiquing this paper that I did. But the critique was so useful that it shaped my entire PhD framework. And now that's going to be my final project. And that actually led to a publication, and well, another publication, not the one that was criticized, but another one. So what I find, even like in applying for the grants or applying for publications and whatnot, even it's just to kind of take a chance on it and see what someone will say. Sometimes people are not just only interested in your ability, but also interested in kind of the attitude you take towards it, which is where kind of my role at University of Lincoln came in as well. Because I was a third-year PhD student, I didn't have my PhD yet, and my supervisor said to me, you're wasting your time, don't even think of applying for a job because you won't get it without a PhD. That's what they said. But again, I had to eat, so I needed a job. So I applied, and the guy that was there, he just said, you know what? Well, I did the presentation, they were happy with the presentation, and we were very friendly, and he was taking me to the interview, and he said, all you have to remember is to be confident. That's all he said, and that kind of just lifted my spirits. So it was mainly, I would say, the interview aspect that I think where I kind of got a little edge in terms of actually being able to get the job without the amount of experience of everybody else. So that's just, I know I've gone on a bit, but that's just to give you an idea of how I see it when it comes to pursuing academia. You might not necessarily have your PhD as yet, you might not necessarily have all of the teaching opportunities to cover your resume, but sometimes there are people out there that are just willing to take a chance on you, and then it kind of builds from there. After that, then you can think about proving yourself, if you want to say that. So these are things that work for me. So in terms of conferences, this has been, are you all PhD students? Yeah, and do you all take part in conferences as well? Yeah, okay, good. So I don't have to press this, but this is what's really worked for me, and this has really shaped my PhD a lot, and also my lecturing, my academic career. Because one, again, a lot of the chapters and major changes and theoretical lens and whatnot that I use came out to advice from experts from conferences. Because I had one supervisor who was an expert in the area, and then another supervisor who was my first, and he was not so much an expert, and he would constantly say to me, you know what, yes, I'm critiquing the structure of your work, but just remember, I'm not an expert on this area. And that kind of gave me doubts heading towards the Viva, which is coming up quite soon. So I found conferences are very useful in terms of just getting that sort of feedback, in terms of, getting real expertise from those who are seen as the experts in the field, where they're criticizing, forcing you to kind of look at your research with a different eye. So that was quite useful. And also, as when you're applying for an academic post, that's something that they look at as well. How many conferences have you attended? Do you have any publications? Those were some of the requirements for an academic post when I applied. Those were sort of the things that they looked at. Seminar presentations and workshops. This is one of these things, and I'll probably come to it a bit as well. This was more referring to not just developmental presentations or training workshops, but also you offering your skills and your expertise, because you are all doing PhDs. So that means that you all have some expertise that the other person doesn't have. And sometimes you taking the, let's say, effort to go and create a seminar, offer a little lecture on what you're studying, that also is quite useful when you're applying for an academic post, because it shows that outside of what you've been doing on a daily basis, you're actually taking the effort as well to go a little further, kind of being very proactive. And research collaborations, which is, one of the biggest, buzz phrases that you hear everyone say. You have to be able to collaborate. You have to be able to collaborate. And that's one of the things that people ask about a lot in terms of, my bosses have been pushing me very much to collaborate within my university, because I tend to collaborate outside of the university, but it's just because there are not many people that do my area of international HR in the University of Lincoln. But this is one thing that has a lot of outcomes, not just in terms of publications, but also in terms of creating those networks with individuals who might offer you opportunities as well. So, for example, let's say, well, this is an example, like me and Cynthia, we haven't done anything yet, but we're kind of through this process, we're making that contact, and we've been talking over the last 6 months along with another colleague of hers, and what we're doing is trying to bridge a gap between two universities. And through doing that, you also make yourself an asset to where you are. So let's say if you have something that you're interested in and your university does not necessarily have the networks or the contacts, through you going and creating that network and bridge, you're showing that in some way you have something indispensable to offer to the university. And when you apply as well to a future academic post, those are the kind of things that they ask about. What other kind of external activities have you been involved with? How have you been, for example, an asset to your current company? What kind of initiatives have you led? And this is where this comes important. So it's as simple as if you're at a conference, giving out your card and meeting new people, sending an email after the conference saying, hi, how are you doing? I'd be interested in your work later. Simple things like that are creating networks for the future. And that's how I met Marina as well, Cynthia's colleague, and why I'm here now. So this is really useful, and this is one of the head things that people ask about now. Part-time teaching. Excuse me. Now this is something that's controversial for PhD students. One, because it's kind of, you have two voices speaking to you. I had my PhD supervisor saying to me, no, don't get involved in any teaching. We need you to concentrate on your PhD. We want you to finish in a certain amount of time. On the other hand, I had the head of the department saying, Rochelle, we'd really like you to get involved in some teaching. We need some extra thing. Because I wanted money as well, I chose to go with the part-time teaching. And it's something that was really, I can't stress how important that is, just because I have a lot of friends who finished their PhDs before me and they wanted to go into academia. And my PhD has been delayed by a year or two. I was telling Cynthia about to approach my 5th year, and that's because I took a full-time job at the end of my 3rd year. But if you want to go into academia, there are very few people, at least in the UK, that are willing to hire you without any form of experience teaching. So if you can have I'll come to that a bit later, but if there are opportunities for part-time teaching, I would say if you're interested in an academic career, is one of the most pivotal things that you can do. I guess with the changing environment being more uncertain as well, and people being more worried about return on investment and making sure that they get the most out of it, they want to ensure that they hire someone who knows what they're doing. So even the slightest amount of teaching says something on your academic resume. One of the things when I applied for the Lincoln job, one of the feedback that they gave me was that they were worried that I didn't have enough module experience, module experience leading modules, and I had taught for 3 years at that time part-time, but they said they were worried that, okay, I might not be able to lead a module because I don't have that experience. But because I had the 3 years, they were willing to say, okay, we'll hire you, and then we'll give you modules to lead and have our elderly colleagues kind of advise you on how to go about it. So in that way, it worked out, but it's very much a risk. Also, in terms of your public speaking skills, both in terms of your ability to orate your PhD, tell people about your PhD, what you're offering and whatnot. Teaching can be quite useful because it kind of gives you that confidence within, let's say, a classroom setting. So I found it very useful for that as well. The first time I was really nervous. So like the first class I did, my voice trembled right through the class. And I think they could tell, because when students see that you're not confident, they kind of start to challenge you. But then as you go along and they realize, okay, she kind of knows what she's talking about, then they start to relax a bit. So I find the more and more I did it, then it was quite useful. And also getting in contact with people across your department, making more close links with your colleagues. And this is quite useful, especially when you're looking for a reference with regards to applying for a lecturing post. When I applied, my reference was my head of department and another lecturer that I had worked with. So that worked in my favor. So for that reason, I think part-time teaching is probably one of the most important. Again, I say it's controversial because you have a PhD to finish. And everyone that I've spoken to in the university that I'm at right now, University of Lincoln, who have started while doing the PhD, all of them have said, okay, yes, I started, and when I was starting, I was about a month away from finishing, but yet it took me an additional year to finish. In my case, it took me an additional year and a half before I finished, and that's because there were months where I wouldn't do any PhD work. I would be marking or writing lesson plans and whatnot. And also a bit of a difficult one is that sometimes it's hard to switch. I don't know what's the word to describe, maybe brain modes from, let's say, from teaching and to concentrating on what's going on in the class, and then switching that again to your research. So I had this plan that, okay, yes, I can do this. I can teach during the day and then go home at 5 o'clock and I start my PhD work. What happened is that I teach during the day, and at 5 o'clock I went to the gym, and then I went to sleep, and no work got done for about a month until we got a break. So it's a bit, I guess it depends on the individual and your ability to balance the two. But the issue with part-time teaching, I know, is that not all universities provide the chance for PhD students to do part-time teaching. And again, it's one of those things that if you want to apply for an academic post, they look for if you have any sort of teaching experience. So if it is that you're in a teaching post, if, for example, you're on a scholarship, or if you're at a university where, let's say, students are not allowed to teach until they finish the PhD, then try another university, apply for a part-time post while you're doing your PhD, possibly at another university, or guest speaking, again, providing some sort of insight on what you do, possibly sending emails to other universities as well, offering to guest speak on a particular topic that you think you have expertise on. And also within even colleges, even teaching at colleges, doing, let's say, guest sessions on academic writing or research skills, those sorts of things. Within your faculty as well, offering a workshop on, let's say, quantitative methods or quantitative methods in marketing, whatever the case may be. And most of the time, your faculties, they're usually very willing for you to do these things. Well, I haven't had the experience of anyone really turning down when a student has offered to provide a workshop, because they usually look for these engaging sessions. So usually you're doing them a favor, and then you have that as well to put on your resume. So whereas you might not have had, let's say, part-time teaching for a year or more or so, or you're not allowed, at least you have on your resume different opportunities or a list of different let's say, events where you were the guest speaker, and that also counts for something. External examination is another way as well. If you haven't taught, just going to another university or applying at another university around the exam period to be a marker of the papers or whatever the case may be, that might be useful as well. Sorry, I haven't stopped to ask questions. Do you have any questions just before I go on?
Yes. When you say part-time teaching, it's important to to teach the same subject you are studying in
Yeah.
your PhD,
Yeah.
how does it relate? And
Yeah.
when you say part-time teaching, it's what level, what kind of students are you
Yeah.
look when you decide?
Sorry. Sorry, I'm running out of, I'm getting really dry now. I agree with you. When I first started, I started on the undergraduate HRM course within the Leicester Business School. So I was lucky to be able to start in my area. And it is quite important because it's the transition or the balance between teaching and research becomes a lot easier if you're teaching in something that you're interested in. So I agree with that. But sometimes you don't have the opportunity just because either they don't need anyone teaching in that area right now. So even if you can't get what you're interested in, I would still try to get another opportunity. For example, a lot of universities have within the business school a separate academic teaching program where they're offering, let's say, where the undergrads are offered how to write at an academic level, how to write critically, those sorts of things are quite useful as well. Because as you're writing a PhD, if you have on your resume that you taught on critical writing, it says something about your skills. It says you might have expertise in writing good papers. So even if it's not directly related to your PhD, it can still you can still connect it in some way. Sorry, I missed the second question, or was that both questions?
No, that's okay.
Okay, and were you, okay. All right, so another method as well is this kind of one-off industry projects, and that's referring to really consultancy. If you have an opportunity to consult, let's say with a firm, for example, if Santander, even if you read something in the paper about Santander or you're familiar with them, you have some internal contact with Santander, you're very friendly with, let's say, the bank teller on Saturdays and she knows your name, feel free to call her up and ask, okay, is the bank looking for this right now, or do they have any projects? Or there's so many different places you can check, online, classifieds, but it's better if you have a network. A person who can kind of vouch for you. But this is usually quite useful, and you find these available everywhere, but it's just a matter of like trolling through the internet until you find an opportunity that's right for you. So again, it can be, for example, I'm an HRM. It could be that I go to Lloyd's Bank in London and just ask them if there are any internal projects or grants or any services that they're looking for at the minute. And a lot of these banks are in different places, different companies. They're usually looking for people to consult, and sometimes they already have their own people. But there might be a time where their people might not be able to provide these skills because they're working on another project. So they might decide to take a chance on you. So it's good to take the chance and offer your skills and make sure you're kind of making the effort to not just stay within the PhD and wait till you're finished to apply for an academic post, because it will be very unlikely, unless you have a very long list of publications and some teaching, that it will go so smoothly. Where the opportunities aren't available for teaching, then I would say try to seek out other opportunities. So again, just going back to, well, summing up really about developmental opportunities, these are kind of the three approaches I take to it. So you can either actively seek out an opportunity. If there's no teaching again available, if there's teaching available, find out from your university, ask a question. If none is available within your department, ask in other departments around the university. Again, start with your university first, because a lot of the times there are management consultancies within the university that are waiting for people, but people just are not aware of them. Or there are academic programs that are looking for additional teachers, but no one is coming forward and they don't know that you were there really wanted to teach or to do something else. Also, there are projects as well outside of the teaching at a lot of universities that are not well advertised. So it's good to really go around and ask the question and find out what's going on around the university, if there's a guest speaker coming in, or if there's a particular project that the university is working on. For example, when I was at Leicester Business School, they were doing, it was called a Square Mile project. And this project was about engaging the community, getting becoming more aware of what's going on in the local community, and for the university to try their best to ensure that the community is benefiting from their skills as well. So this involved a load of different activities. I just volunteered for some of the activities, and some of them were, for example, going on Saturday to a community center and sitting down and sewing a cushion. That's all it was. It's not directly related to academia, but it was related to the overall project. So on your resume, what would that look like? Engaging with the local community and social partners. So it's just kind of translating those sort of activities. Another one was involving a flash mob. The university, this was the dean of the university as well. The dean of the university was on stage like doing dancing in a flash mob. And this again, the idea was about getting the community together and engaging them and creating those networks. So just simple things like that can be quite useful, because that's on my resume as well. Volunteer in the, if you look on my LinkedIn, volunteer in the Leicester Square Mile project, did these community activities. So again, it's not just always about the academic skills, but it's showing what else you have in addition to that. Because let's say you leave with your PhD in marketing, for example, there are 200 more people across Brazil, probably more than that have a PhD in marketing, that are all applying to teach at FGV University. So what makes you different from them? You all have PhDs. Let's say each of you have a publication, a publication or two. Possibly, let's narrow that number down a bit more. 80 of those, also the 200, have publications in 3 or 4-star journals, and they only want 1 or 2 lectures. So what makes you stand out from that group of 80? So it's things like these, like that, let's say the additional projects, the Square Mile projects, engaging in the university activities, even doing like volunteering for open days, and also collaborating, creating research collaborations and showing that you can be an indispensable asset to the university. Those kind of things are what kind of gives you that push, or says, okay, this is some person that we can work with that will help in our growth and those sort of things. So even if you don't have all of the tick points, the part-time teaching, the this, the that, those sort of additional activities can still say a lot about the kind of person you are and how you would to work with. So in my case, I think for example, I didn't have the module leadership experience. Because of some other experiences I had, they said, okay, we'll hire her and we'll send her on this course, or we'll hire her and we'll put her alongside somebody else to work with. And that's what happened. In the first year, I worked alongside an older colleague who showed me how to, let's say, organize modules and how to write particular plans and write up reports. So that's a good way as well, whereas it's not available. My approach through and through. Just say yes, even if you don't think, let's say someone wants you to lead a project and you haven't done a project management course. Say yes, and then after you say yes, maybe the thing is, they might have just met you at a coffee shop or some networking event and thought, well, he seems like a go-getter, so I think he'd be good for this project because he would be motivating. But then you don't have a project management degree. But say yes, and let's say the project is a year long. Let's say on day 1, go and look for a project management course, or find a colleague who has the expertise, and then they can share that expertise with you. So a lot of the expertise that I've learned around teaching and, let's say, research collaborations and consultancy, I don't have a degree in project management. I don't have before that consultancy experience, I didn't have any consultancy experience, and that went really well. So things like that, just kind of pair it with someone, they can benefit from your skills and you can benefit from their skills as well. So I would say yes and then learn after. Don't do this with driving tests, though. You should learn to drive first before you hit the road, but you get the idea. Again, if no opportunity exists, create one. If there is no part-time teaching available within your university, perhaps you can offer independent seminars outside of the university, advertise online, or possibly another university offer a guest lecture and see who attends. Even if you have a guest lecture and only 2 people attend, you still have it on your resume that you did a guest lecture at University of Harvard on this day. So that's quite useful as well. Same thing with projects as well, creating your own project and just showing, let's say if you have an interview, how you were involved in the evolution of that project and how it ended. I had a friend, she works at BBC in London, and when she was applying for her new job, because she started out as, I can't remember, she started out in an internship, and then she was applying for a business analyst position. But each time, because I do HR, and when you do HR, people assume that you know how to get a job, which you should know how to get a job if you do HR. But she usually comes and she says, okay, what can I do, what can I do? So she's this kind of person that she's always pursuing something new. She's very, very smart. She's very intellectual and very technologically savvy. So she's created her own app before. She's created her own film company. All of these different things she's kind of pursued on a weekend. But a lot of the things didn't work out for her. So for example, the app. I can't remember what it's called. It's called Film Kit. If you guys ever feel like downloading it, I'm not sure if it's still there. But I was asking her about that, and she was saying that, well, that didn't work out so well, and in the end, she abandoned it. So she's not sure she can actually use it. But what I was telling her is that through creating that project alone, whether or not it worked, you've shown that you have the ability to be innovative. So I was saying, in your interview, why don't you just go and talk them through the evolution of that project, and where it didn't work out, you can possibly give your reasons, because the reasons might not have been because of your ability. Your reasons might have been because of the particular circumstance, the timing, whatever the case may be. And also just not the willingness for her to pursue the project, but also what she learned in pursuing the project about, let's say, project management. That comes in very handy as well. So she was saying, like, when she went to the interview, because she was at BBC, she was at BBC, but it was the Guardian app offering her a new post. So when she went to the interview, when she was given the feedback, she said that she communicated all of this to them, and she didn't get the job. She was number 2 for the job, and they went with the other person. But what she was saying was that they put her resume aside and they offered her another position, because they were saying, well, based on these skills you have through creating all of these different projects, I believe that you do have something to offer us. So just things like that says a lot about the type of person you are and your ability within the firm, or within, in this case, academia, if you want to pursue academia. So if you don't think there are any opportunities, if you're coming up blank when you search online or when you search different places, have a sit down, even join some colleagues that you work with, and see if you can come up with your own project and see where that can go. So these are just some things that have worked for me. So when I was doing my PhD was because as I said, I'm at the end now. But I did some guest lectures on, let's say, how to write a resume, how to pursue your academic career, that sort of thing. Research workshops and exchanges, consultancies, university collaborations. This is also quite useful, committee roles. So for example, going back with this whole spirit of saying yes, right now, universities in England are trying their best to show that they are diverse. Diverse not just in terms of having multicultural population, but in terms of showing that you are empowering women, showing that you are giving the equal opportunities to everyone. And as a result, they're all going for these kind of certifications that shows that, just so they can put the stamp on their site. So right now in Lincoln, there's this Athena Swan Prize, call it a prize, but you can get its status, Athena Swan accreditation, and you can get bronze, silver, or gold. And my university was trying to go for bronze, and this involves basically reviewing the university's employment strategies and seeing where they might be biased in terms of employing males and employing females. It's not the most exciting thing, but I just volunteered for it, just to be on the committee and have the experience of how do you go about gaining that prize. And that's something that's gonna go on my resume as well. So things like, if your university is going after accreditation, or if there is some new committee that consulting on a change at the university, feel free to volunteer and get involved. Just the fact that you were sitting in that room says a lot about the type of person that you are. Developmental workshops, well, I guess you're doing this now, so this is nothing to talk about. And professional certifications, where you can make sure that you, I don't know, is there an equivalent in Brazil to the higher, what's your teaching accreditation here? What would be a teaching?
CAPS.
Sorry?
CAPS.
CAPS. Is that when you need to teach at higher education level?
This is the governmental authority
Yeah.
accredited all higher education with it.
Yeah.
CAPS.
It's called CAPS.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. In England, the equivalent, I guess, would be the Higher Education Academy. Yeah. So where you have the opportunity to get those accreditations, whether or not you pursue it
I
independently.
don't think so that we have some certification like chartered and
You don't have these?
for higher education.
Not for higher education. Oh, okay. So what is the CAPS?
There's some accreditation or certification for professional practitioners.
Yeah.
Like your HR.
Yeah.
Chartered.
But not for teaching at higher education level.
No.
Oh, that's good. That makes it a lot easier. Yeah, but where those are available, so in terms of the professional qualifications, HRM law and whatnot, even if it's not attached to your degree, I would take the time to pursue it. Not necessarily during your PhD, because this is a bit of a load. So I would say, yeah, as I said, I'm the type of person to jump into everything and then realize I'm drowning later, but I'm not going to advise that for everybody. But some things you have to know with regards to the timing, and this is too big of a pursuit to jump into during a PhD. Luckily, the course that I did, when I did my master's, it was attached to my master's, so it wasn't a problem. It came along with getting the degree. So that made it a lot easier. But I would say where you do get the opportunity to pursue the professional certification, you should do it. The only issue why I hesitate to recommend it during a PhD is because usually at the end of a lot of the certifications, you have to write a project that is almost as big as a thesis. So you don't want to have to be writing two dissertations almost. It's usually a management report, but I guess it might differ across different fields, so it's hard to generalize. I'll go to that. So in terms of my pitfalls, you can probably tell that my biggest pitfall is time management. So in terms of which opportunities to take, there's no hard and fast rule, but I guess you just have to know what you can do and what you're capable of, and know when to say no. In some cases, I have not known when to say no. I've gotten it over my head, but luckily it's worked out. I was saying yesterday in the other group that it's a bit of a catch-22, because on one hand, you want all of these things to make your resume look good. You want the research grant, you want the part-time teaching, you want these side projects and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the basic thing that you need to get hired is the PhD. So you have to be careful. When I got hired, it was because I was nearing the end of my PhD. A year and a half later, I mean, in the UK, once you finish it with between 3 to 5 years, they're happy. So I'm coming up onto 5 years. So they're still happy once I finish it within the next couple of months, which I should be able to do. But this is the basic thing, so don't let that fall on the side. I would say you really need to prioritize and weigh up the projects that you pursue. In some cases, if you can align them with your PhD, that's good. So like, for example, some publications that I pursued were chapters of my PhD. So in that way, I didn't feel like I had to put the PhD aside to do it because it was coming directly out to the PhD. So in that way, you can kind of align the different projects, but still be able to say, well, I have this and I also have this, although those things are integrated as well. So I would say just be very careful the opportunities that you choose, and also who you choose to collaborate. You might, as I was saying earlier there, you might not be the expert in a particular skill. So you might choose to team up with somebody who has the particular skills that you want. Just because that person has the skills doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right person to work with. Possibly because of attitude differences, because of their time management skills, because of their family commitments, whatever the case may be. You have to choose very wisely. I have a colleague, he just finished his degree at Oxford, and now he's doing another degree at Cambridge. He was a child genius. He was the person that created this big project in Australia. He had a first degree at the age of 14. He was a proper genius. So he is in the UK now, 5 masters later. He has 5 master's degrees, and he's thinking about doing a second PhD. Crazy, just crazy. But he's really good. He has a really good business sense and that sort of thing. And I was really thinking, well, it would be excellent to start a business with him. And we were discussing, because we shared an office, and we had similar ideas, and we were discussing starting a business. And because I'm very much interested in consultancy, that's kind of like my end game, so I want to go back to that. But After getting to know him a couple of months, I realized he's not the person for me. And why that was is because while he's brilliant, I think that we would butt heads a lot because he has this very brash manner. And he blames it on being Australian. That's always his excuse. So for example, if I say, oh, I think this idea would work, he wouldn't say, oh, I'm not sure if that's the right idea for us all the time, I would do it differently. He would say, that's horse crap, that's horse manure, that's a bunch of rubbish, no, I can't deal with a person 24/7 with that sort of attitude. So he's brilliant, but yeah, and he would do it in front of people. We would be in a room and I'd be talking and he'd go, that's horse manure, and it's like, okay. Yeah, so just be very careful, know who you can work with. Don't get someone that is gonna frustrate you or make the process even more stressful. So I would just say, just be very careful when you're going about your projects to pursue. It might be the perfect project for you, but it might just be the wrong time to pursue it. And just be careful who you collaborate with and to prioritize your pursuit, especially the PhD, which is still the baseline. And mind your health. This is just my final slide. Just be very careful because a PhD is a stressful process. It really is a stressful process. And I think all of these things apply to me, especially. They're probably hard to describe. Most days I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm still waiting patiently on my degree. But permanent head damage is probably the most accurate one. But you have to be, I would just say, just be careful with your health. And I know it sounds very cliche. It might sound very, I don't mean to be condescending, but why I say so is because every single person I know, maybe it's a university, that did a PhD, the rest of business school, suffered some sort of thing. I had a friend, her hair started to fall out. She also had high blood pressure. At one point, she was being tested for anemia, all these different things. And now I have high blood pressure as well. I go to the gym, I eat healthy, but now I have high blood pressure, which I'm monitoring. So in pursuing your projects, also just be very careful, know what you can handle, and take care of yourself in the process. If you no sense being a brilliant person, having all these things on your resume, and then 2 weeks later, you're home robot in bed, which kind of is what happened to me last year. I had like a really good teaching year. I got nominated for this prize. I got the research grant, which went down on my knee as well. And then I got really good feedback, and my bosses kept emailing me saying, oh, the students are saying this, the students are saying that. So I was like, good, my efforts are paying off, all this stress is paying off. But then what happened is that during my performance appraisal, while they said that they were really happy, they also said, now, what we want you to do in the next year is to do less. And I was like, what do you mean? Because you're providing all this pressure. You're saying you want publication. You're saying you want this. And I'm trying to meet your goals. I know I've met your goals, and you're saying do less. I felt like conflicting. But essentially, I think what happened was that a month before that, I was homesick for 2 weeks. And I was actually broken out in warts as well. And when I went to the doctor, like I had warts on my face. And when I went to the doctor said, you have these because you're completely worn down. Warts show that your system is completely worn down and you need to rest. But yet I was going along, I thought I was happy. I thought everything was going well. But yeah, it was kind of really taking a physical toll. So that 2 weeks off, classes had to be reorganized and whatnot. That kind of put me back in my work, and my bosses were not too happy about that. I think it wasn't that they weren't too happy, they were concerned about me. But at the end of the day, they're right. You got to take care of yourself. As my dad would say, if you're sick, I don't mean to be morbid, but if you die, someone else will take the role and someone else will do the work. The work will get done. So take care of yourself first. So that's all the advice I can offer in terms of how I go about my academic career. So thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions if you have.
What is your teaching load? And for example, how do you think about like postdoc positions where you have like it's a research oriented postdoc? Because you're talking more about short-term strategies. And how would that have an effect in the long-term career? Because and if you have any strategy for that, to compensate.
In terms of strategy to compensate.
To compensate, like people are having postdoc positions, full-time researchers. So we have 3 years full-time researchers after you get your PhD, and then when you're teaching as well, and you have to like you, obviously the person should have more publications than you, and that will affect. And I think these 3 first years after you get your PhD are so like fundamental for the impact on your long-term career.
I agree. What I would say is that that's the ideal, a postdoc position. Whoops. Sorry, I'm breaking up the university. But I would say that's the ideal. So when I was applying for a job, I told my supervisor, and they said it would be really good if you could apply for a postdoc position, because it means that you have 3 years and that university will give you the time to research and not pile as much teaching on. So most people I know in postdoc position, they have probably less than 100 teaching hours. They do 2 or 3 hours a week, and then they have that solid time to research. So that's the ideal. When I applied for a job, because of the area, I'm in HRM, well, I'm shifting more into international business. But when I applied, there were no postdoc positions that really was around my area. So there were a lot of things. The closest I found to what I wanted to do was something on employee engagement. And because I'm very much interested in the international side of HRM, cross-cultural change, I went with lecturing position that could give me half research, half teaching. So I would say if you're applying after a PhD, the postdoc is probably the best thing to go for if they're available, but they're fewer and more far between than lecturing posts. If you have an opportunity to go for one, I would do it, because you'll get the time to finish your PhD. Well, I think in most cases you have to have already finished, well, in all cases, but you'll definitely get the solid time to publish on one. And even if, for example, let's say your first 3 years is a postdoc position and you don't have much teaching, you only have 2 or 3 hours, but then you have a long list of publications, you're still in good standing and you're going to be hot off the press for people hiring as well. They'll be looking forward to hiring you just because a lot of universities now are looking for those publications, especially, it depends on some universities. Some are more research and teaching focused, but in the UK, they're more, like almost all of them are now becoming more research focused because of how the industry is changing and the rest of that sort of thing. It was originally, when I joined, I think they tried to go for this half-half approach, which is what I like to go because I do really enjoy teaching. But now it's going more towards research. So now we've had a lot of lecturers who they've been hired by the university over 20 years ago, and they've now left their posts because when they were hired, it was for teaching. And now it's being demanded that they have the research as well. So yeah, I would say the postdoc is probably the best thing you can get, and it would probably make you more hireable if you want a research teaching post. If not, go with the teaching and just try to balance, because it's not that you wouldn't be at a disadvantage from taking a teaching post unless it's, well, with the time management thing, but in terms of professionally, you wouldn't be at a disadvantage, but it just means that you'll have to work harder to make time for your research. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Sorry, did you have another question?
Yeah, kind of.
Sorry.
But I mean, when you showed the Jim Carrey, Jim Carrey feature, it was Yes Man, and you talked about the yes, and I thought you were going to talk about men. I'm doing my PhD in Sweden, so it's a very gender.
Yeah.
We're always talking about gender.
I should have yes man and yes
So
woman. Sorry.
Yeah. How do you think about gender communicates curiosity?
Yeah. I think universities are making more efforts, and it's because of that whole Athena Swan thing I was talking about earlier. They're making more efforts to show that they're equal in terms of hiring gender-wise.
But I mean, do you see that actually going on? I'm asking because like Sarah Mack quitted the Goldsmiths, because of that. She was in like this really high ranking committee that was leading this change in the UK, and she was just saying how that role kind of fires back because they are it was more about publicity than theory of change. junior faculty is basically women,
Yeah.
but senior faculty is basically men.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think I can only say about my experience at the university that I'm at,
Yeah,
which is right now the dean, the vice chancellor is a woman, and the head of my department is a woman. She's the one in the steering committee. So at that university, you have a lot of women in very high positions, and maybe that's why you see more of that change taking a real effect, sort of thing, because they're quite keen to make sure that women are empowered in the university. At the previous university, at Leicester Business School, it was the same actually. The head of the department was a woman as well. The dean was a man, but I never felt the gender differences. I didn't really feel like I was at a disadvantage. Sometimes I think always the biggest disadvantage I've experienced is with regards to age, because people assume that you're a certain age. Like every time I go in an undergraduate classroom, they try to tease out how old I am. So like the international students would say, they're really direct and like, how can you be teaching me? Like the UK students, the culture is different. They would be, okay, so you started teaching in these couple of years, and how long have you been teaching, and when were you born? They're trying to do the maths to work out your age. And I think that has been more of a disadvantage, the senior and junior lecturers, just because with assumptions that people make about you, it means that you get treated in a certain way, or some opportunities won't be made available to you. So I think those are the kind of things I've more had to deal with, as opposed to I've never had any gender issues. Thank you guys again.